We've all been there. That moment when you look at a situation, a job you hate, an investment that's tanking, a relationship that ended months ago, and you realize you're still mentally tethered to it. You're not just reacting to the present, you're arguing with the past. You know logically that you should cut your losses, move on, or accept reality. Yet some invisible force keeps dragging you back. It's the silent, grinding realization that your own mind is the anchor, keeping you stuck in the currents of regret and inertia. This isn't just poor judgment or lack of discipline. This is a psychological trap. And today, in our ongoing series, Decoding Mental Shortcuts, we are performing the autopsy on the 3 interconnected cognitive biases that conspire to keep you perpetually bound to yesterday's decisions. The feeling of being stuck is the symptom. The diagnosis, the actual mechanism keeping us paralyzed, is the collision of 3 powerful cognitive biases. When we perform this psychological autopsy, we find that the mind, in its quest for safety and efficiency, creates a perfect prison built on past efforts. The first bias we must decode is the sunk cost fallacy. This is the urge to continue investing in a failing endeavor simply because you have already invested so much time, money, or emotional energy. It's the voice of regret masquerading as commitment. Daniel Kahneman, in his foundational work on intuitive and deliberate thinking, describes this using his System 1 and System 2 framework. Our quick, emotional System 1 brain registers the pain of the previous loss, the sunk cost, and overrides the rational, analytical System 2 logic that would tell us to walk away. We confuse past expense with future potential. We feel that stopping means making the past investment truly meaningless. In reality, the investment is already lost. The continued effort is simply new loss. This fallacy works hand in hand with the second trap, the status quo bias. Our minds are wired to prefer the familiar, even if the familiar is miserable. The status quo bias represents a deep-seated resistance to change. Why? Because change introduces uncertainty, and the brain perceives uncertainty as a threat. The existing path, no matter how painful, is a known quantity. To venture into the unknown requires expending precious mental energy and facing the potential for new failure, which our brain instinctively tries to minimize. Finally, the most potent conspirator in the psychological triad is loss aversion. Kahneman and Tversky demonstrated conclusively that the pain of losing something is approximately twice as powerful psychologically as the pleasure of gaining an equivalent thing. This means the idea of losing the potential return on a sunk cost or losing the established comfort of the status quo creates an emotional hurdle so high that we choose the known misery over the possibility of gain. We don't fear failure as much as we fear the final, irrevocable confirmation of loss. These 3 biases, sunk cost, status quo, and loss aversion, don't exist in isolation. They form a feedback loop that maximizes inertia, ensuring that the anchor of the past holds fast. These 3 biases are not abstract concepts. They are the lived experience of countless people. Let me share a composite case study, drawing from my own experience and the patterns I've observed as a fellow traveler on this journey. Imagine someone named Alex. Alex spent 5 years of their life relentlessly pursuing a specific, highly technical career, let's say a specialized engineering field. They racked up significant student debt, pulled all-nighters, and sacrificed personal relationships. After graduation, Alex landed a demanding job in the field. But within a year, they realized they hated it. The work was soul-crushing, the company culture was toxic, and their mental health was plummeting. This is where the biases lock in. The sunk cost fallacy immediately whispers, "You can't quit. You spent 5 years and $80,000 on this degree. That investment must pay off. If you leave now, all of that was wasted." This whisper is paralyzing, forcing Alex to double down on the commitment instead of recognizing the job itself as a new problem, requiring a new solution. Then, the status quo bias kicks in. Alex knows the misery of this job, but they know the process of this job. They understand the office politics, the terrible commute, and the predictable paycheck. The idea of quitting, of facing months of unemployment, of having to learn a completely new entry-level skill, of telling their parents they abandoned the safe path, is terrifying. The pain of the unknown is instantly perceived as greater than the known chronic pain of their current situation. Finally, loss aversion seals the deal. The fear is not just losing the paycheck, it's losing the identity tied to being a specialized engineer. It's losing the social validation, the comfortable title, and the potential future security. The psychological cost of losing the past investment and the current stability is amplified by a factor of 2, making even a highly attractive alternative career option seem less appealing than the current, albeit painful, routine. Alex stays not out of belief in the job, but out of fear of finalizing the loss of the path they were supposed to be on. They become a prime example of someone wearing golden handcuffs, a comfortable prison built by past commitments. The core tragedy is that they are so focused on recouping the loss of the past that they fail to see the loss of their future happening in slow motion. When I realized that my own reluctance to leave a similar situation was not a failure of will, but a predictable psychological response to these 3 biases, I began to see the way out.
The first step in escaping this psychological prison is to admit the handcuffs are there. The second and most critical step is to realize that the key is not external. It is a shift in perspective, a playbook of mental tools we can deploy. We need 2 primary mechanisms to dismantle the sunk cost fallacy, the status quo bias, and loss aversion. Tool 1. Shame resilience and decoupling the decision from self-worth. The pain that keeps us stuck is often shame. The sunk cost fallacy thrives because we conflate a bad decision with being a bad person or a failure. We refuse to quit because we are terrified of the definitive public confirmation that we got it wrong. To combat this, we must activate shame resilience. Research by Brené Brown underscores the importance of separating the self from the behavior. The moment we recognize the bias, the moment we say, "I am continuing this because of the sunk cost fallacy, not because it's a good investment," we create distance. The playbook instruction here is simple but profound. Decouple the decision. Tell yourself, the investment of time and money in that failed project or that dead-end job was not a moral flaw. It was a decision made with the best available information at the time. The decision to leave is not a failure of character. It is an act of courageous self-correction based on new information. The past decision simply becomes data. You don't owe the past, you owe your future self an efficient allocation of your time and energy. Tool 2. The future self-reframing of progress. To overcome the status quo bias and the crippling effect of loss aversion, we must change our definition of progress itself. Carol Dweck's work on the growth mindset gives us the lens. The status quo holds power because the brain fears the loss of stability. But what if the only stable element in your life was your commitment to learning and evolving? We must reframe the terrifying loss into essential evolution. Ask yourself not, what am I losing by walking away, but what is the future me gaining by beginning today? This technique, the future self reframing, forces your system to mind to engage. Instead of focusing on the pain of the short-term loss, the shame of quitting, the temporary dip in income, focus on the inevitable outcome of staying put, a life guaranteed to be smaller and less fulfilling. The growth mindset defines progress not by how perfectly you adhere to a plan made 5 years ago, but by how quickly you adapt, pivot, and learn from mistakes. The true loss is the time you spend orbiting a dead star. The new status quo should be, if it's not serving my growth, it must be pruned. This isn't inspiration, it's a clinical tool to make forward motion the only logical option.
We perform these autopsies not to assign blame, but to gain clarity. By naming the sunk cost fallacy, the status quo bias, and loss aversion, we strip them of their insidious power. We turn emotional traps into predictable psychological data points. And the moment we do that, we realize that everyone struggles with this triad of inertia. Resilience is not forged in isolation. It's built in conversation, where we can share our data and recognize the patterns in each other. Your willingness to step out of the trap, to accept the loss, and choose a new direction is a powerful mentor for others. So let's begin that conversation now. Below, I want you to consider one specific area of your life, a project, a goal, a relationship, where you suspect the sunk cost fallacy is currently at work, keeping you mentally tethered to the past. The question is simple, yet therapeutic. What is one specific past investment of time, money, or emotion that you are still struggling to decouple from your sense of self-worth? Share it. Name the bias and begin the process of building your resilience playbook with our community.